Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the channel. Today I'll be discussing why I was wrong about Alaric Saltzman being stronger than the Mikkelsons in the Vampire Diaries, Season 3 through the original Season 3, and his actual placement within the universe's hierarchy. I'll begin by laying down foundations or consistent narrative frameworks within the verse that I'll use to justify my arguments for Alaric later on in the video. Firstly, let's discuss vampirism and how it typically works in the TVD verse. So upon the creation of the first generation of vampires, later known as the Originals, through dark magic possessed by Esther, a witch hoping to create monsters capable of combating wolves that threaten their livelihood, they would later accidentally create a second generation referred to as the Trinity. Then both groups continued making more vampires over millennia, leading to countless generations onward. Now practically every human turned vampire over that time, from each new generation created by another, can be traced back to the original bloodline of vampires known as the Mikkelsons. Through a connection created from their first ever sire vampires, every single new vampire made since the second generation onward is magically dependent on one of the 6 Mikkelson originals, because their immortality has the closest or strongest link to dark magic in this verse. Essentially, this means that original vampires are the strongest source of vampirism, and every other non-original species is a diluted version, with less magic potency. Even non-original vampires of comparable age would be inferior to originals due to them having less magical potency. Why is this important, you ask? Well, when considering that older vampires become more powerful, if non-originals possess less magical potency than the Mikkelsons, even at comparable ages, we can conclude that all original vampires grow stronger with age. This matches feats demonstrated in the series and aligns with the logical aspect of vampirism, rendering any claims to the contrary false, which contradicts established characteristics and power levels of vampires in the show. So following this logic, original vampires are at the top of the food chain. Whatever lesser-related vampire species can do, originals should be able to do as well or better. They will also have more resistance to conventional weaknesses, such as vervain, wood, fire, and magic, all of which still harm them but at a reduced level compared to regular vampires. Now I'm going to propose something vital for later in this video. I need you to listen carefully. So when considering how magic sometimes functions as a hacks ability in TVD, meaning it can amplify stats, bypass durability, stop time, attack souls, or nullify vampirism.
My fangs. What the hell happened to my fangs?
Older vampires or superior species would generally resist some forms of magic better than others. This creates a direct correlation between magical resistance and potency within vampire hierarchy. This is supported by Occam's razor, which essentially suggests making the simplest hypothesis with the fewest assumptions while still fitting observed data. So if we follow that principle, stronger originals, higher magical tolerance, weaker diluted vamps, less defense against said magics. This logically follows since many cases demonstrate older vampires displaying magic resistance than younger ones, or superior physical stats leading to better resistance.
I've been around a long time, Bonnie. You're gonna have to do better than that.
Oh. I'm sorry. You were saying?
A good example is Mikael pulling out the Papa Tunde blade despite being weakened, and previously overpowering Klaus, who was unable to remove the blade before. Essentially, if we have 2 non-original vampires of the same age and Vampire A can resist or survive magical drainage for a longer time than Vampire B, then the likelihood of Vampire A being stronger than Vampire B is significantly higher, unless proven otherwise. Secondly, we must cover that the Enhanced Original Vampire is not a new species at all. I, and many others, have made the mistake of claiming he was. This is proven false when we look at the terminology. To enhance or to be enhanced means to further improve the quality, value, or extent of something already original. In this instance, when Esther made Alaric an original, she intended for him to be an improvement of her children and husband's species, not a new one. This explains why she phrases him as just as her husband, Mikael, another original, who hunted other originals. We know this is true since Alaric, like them, exhibits conventional vampire weaknesses, as demonstrated in Season 3. So we logically conclude he's simply another original vampire. Lastly, I'll briefly cover the narrative intent and anti-feats for Alaric, the so-called Enhanced Original. Before we discuss the narrator's intended placement, we should recap from my last video. In that video, I discussed the general consensus that Rick struggled against the weakest version of Klaus by far, and failed to stake him unlike Mikhail. By rebuttal, Rick was actively only trying to stake Klaus with one arm, only failing due to Elena's intervention. Since then, my opinion has shifted slightly. This is due to the arguments proposed for Klaus regarding their brief encounter. These claims affirm that Nick was in a disadvantage, having placed himself in a vulnerable position and being restricted from fighting how he wanted. My response to these, wholly hypothesis contrary to fact. The idea that Nick would have performed better if he wasn't quote-unquote restricted is so illogical it's not even funny. Let me tell you why. If Alaric was made to be an improvement of all the originals, yes, that would include the original hybrid. What makes you think Klaus utilizing his combat skill would shift the tides in his favor? We've seen lesser combatants in the TVD-verse contend or beat those superior in fighting from simply being stronger. Then if we're acknowledging the fact that Rick is probably one of the most skilled fighters in the verse, how would he actually lose in a straight hand-to-hand fight? But I guess we're not ready for that conversation. Not only this, but if I wanted to make an unsensible argument that would actually be justified by on-screen showings, Rick had literally just turned into a vampire a few hours ago, and wouldn't actually know how to utilize his vampirism to its full extent. So, for all we know, he could only be using half or less of what he's actually capable of doing and wouldn't even know it, because he is just fighting off raw instinct against someone who actually knows how to utilize their advantages, regardless if he got to use them or not. Regardless of how you interpret the fight, Rick practically no-diffed Klaus, and no amount of being able to fight how he wanted would change that. As for the narrative intent, well, based off a statement made by one of the writers of TVD, Michael Narducci, he believes that Marcel and Alaric are the same level of strength, immortality, but due to Marcel's venom, he would quote-unquote, wipe the floor with Alaric. Using this statement as justification for Marcel or Lucien scaling above Alaric falls under both an anecdotal fallacy and appeal to emotion fallacy. Why? Because the writer literally says he thinks that. This isn't thinks doesn't matter if he can't logically follow up on why it's true. That'd be like him saying, oh, because base Lucien is comparable in age to the Mikhaelsons, I think he's on par with original vampires even before the serum, which is clearly false, by the way. It's also a consensus in power scaling that if a writer's statement is inconsistent with what's portrayed on screen, then his or her statement shouldn't be used as justification for a character. And well, look at what we have here. Michael Narducci's implication is that Marcel and Alaric are basically equal in strength, with the only reason Marcel would win being the factor of his venom. If you've been paying attention to the show, you'd know the only reason upgraded original bites are lethal is because they contain white oak. Well, what do we have here? Alaric tanking being staked by white oak. Thought so. Now, with all these established foundations, I can safely move on to covering how actually strong the Enhanced Original Vampire really is. As it turns out, I was actually wrong about the true strength of Vampiric. He doesn't actually scale above originals in TO Season 3. No, instead, he scales above them even in Season 5. This is due to him displaying a higher level of magical resistance to the same shared weakness of his species, which just further implies he's more magically potent than they are even after they've grown stronger. I'll list 3 of his best feats that highlight this being the case. 1. Resisting the desiccation spell. Yes, Rick actually did resist the spell, as Bonnie confirmed that Klaus made contact, and upon Alaric breaking his arm, she stated that the connection broke. Despite failing, Nick managed to hold out for 13 seconds before being overpowered. In those first few seconds, most vampires affected by the desiccation spell become unable to fight back or slowly lose the will to resist.
So the world can see you exactly as you are. Cold, gray, hideous monster.
Ça va de masque.
Alaric would have been losing strength but still managed to overcome both the spell and Klaus's physical might with little effort. I've already made a video covering this argument. Even though it's usable, in my opinion, it's Rick's weakest feat for proving his superiority. 2. Walking in sunlight. A standard weakness all vampires share, even originals, because of the drawbacks of dark magic that created them. This is why daylight rings were invented to grant magical protection from the sun. Why is this significant? Because vampires who remain in sunlight without a ring are usually burnt to a crisp or set aflame instantly. Even Elijah, in Season 5, burst into flames after 9 seconds.
Goodbye, Elijah Michaels.
Yet Rick, while still harmed by it, remained under UV rays for 17 seconds, showing only mild discomfort. The magical potency of sunlight should be scaled higher than traditional witches' power, and would require immense power to resist it. So, if Elijah has 16 or 17 years of growth from the time that's passed since TVD Season 3, and we know vampires grow in strength with age, thereby his magical potency should have grown as well. Yet, he cannot resist combustion for longer than Alaric could. This would just mean it's safe to assume Rick still holds more magical potency than Elijah, which implies superior vampirism overall. This would also translate to the other originals, such as Rebecca and Cole, because they share the same vulnerability and are around the same age as Elijah. Alaric would also scale above Klaus due to the fact that Elijah can harm Nick and somewhat contend with him in their fights in Season 5. Plus, Klaus is only immune to the sun via his hybrid nature. If he were to have his wolf side bound like Haley did, he'd be affected by its UV rays due to being an original, meaning he'd have lesser magical potency. And while a more ambiguous claim, Alaric should scale above Marcel and Lucien, both still wearing their daylight rings and to technic just original vampires with a lethal bite. The term upgrade means to in particular improve by adding or replacing components, ergo the bite, but still holding the same weaknesses from what's shown in Seasons 4 and 5. Then from Marcel, who's occasionally being contended or sometimes even overwhelmed by Nick in combat, who Rick should scale above, should be able to perform better than Klaus when facing Marcellus, who outscales Lucien from Feats. The most significant of the 3 feats, yet somehow not talked about enough, is how Rick managed to eat being staked by Rebecca and Caroline. This feat automatically places him above the originals due to 2 reasons. The first and most predominant reason is that wooden objects of any kind, inverse, are effective in temporarily killing or harming an original. When staked in the heart or harmed by a wooden object, the vampire in question will lose all will to fight or temporarily be killed. This remains very consistent throughout the series. The second reason, the fact that regular white oak is capable of killing all originals due to its magical connection to nature, being another side effect of the immortality curse granted to them via the white oak tree. It's essentially a hacks-based weapon that ignores durability, and once plunged into their hearts, bursts them into flames. Even when it was depowered, it was capable of incapacitating Klaus for a bit. Why is this significant? Because neither of the two happened to Alaric. Despite the fact that Rick is just another original, and Esther never mentioned giving him immunity to the standard weakness of his kind, she only gave him improvements. So essentially, her enhancements to the immortality spell made Rick so magically potent that those typical weaknesses are just minor inconveniences for him. Wow. And before anyone tries to imply that Alaric's life is linked to Alina's, is what grants him these so-called immunities, I want you to remember the originals are linked to the white oak tree, and desiccation by regularly staking or having their neck snapped is considered a temporary death to them. So, if we were to apply that same logic, if a vampire's life is linked to something, then they shouldn't be able to be killed even for a little while, right? Yet that's not the case at all. So it doesn't logically track that being linked to Alina would grant him immunity to being temporarily killed. Nor does it actually follow the show's own depicted logic of immortality. In summary, vampires all possess a certain level of magical potency. Originals have the highest due to a stronger source, hence they scale above non-originals. A higher level of magical resistance implies superior vampirism, which translates to superior physicality. Alaric is an original vampire who displays higher magical resistance against his species' shared weaknesses. He cannot logically do this without being more magically potent than others, which just implies he has superior vampirism and thus better physical capabilities compared to his counterparts. All of this is supported by Occam's razor and the show's own logic of vampirism. Either way, this is just my take on the Enhanced Original Vampire with established hierarchy and lore of the verse. This video was made mostly for my Alaric fans to provide arguments against those who disagree with his scaling above Season 3 originals. If you disagree, you may attempt to debunk these claims without falling into biased narratives, and I shall consider responding as I have the time to do so.